Professor Richard Wolff spoke to David Pakman, and he gave us a scathing indictment of how the U.S. handled COVID.
Why in the world were we unprepared? We had companies that can produce masks and gloves and ventilators and all of that, but they didn't do it. And I know why. I'm an economist. What I study, it isn't profitable. No company wants to produce masks by the millions, store them in warehouses around the country where the population is concentrated, make sure that they are clean, make sure that they don't deteriorate, replace those that do, watch the whole thing. And then you never know when the next virus will be. Will you have to sit on all of this for 2 years, for 6 years, or for 20 years? So it's not profitable. It's not a rational, capitalist, profit-driven calculation to make. So the companies didn't, and we didn't have the ventilators, the gloves, the masks, and all the rest. And there's no shorthand way of saying it. Private capitalism and the public health don't work well together. The United States has 4.5% of the world's people, and we have 25% of the world's COVID cases and COVID deaths. We're a rich country. That is a statistic that screams something fundamental is wrong if a society with our capability has such a record. In the European countries, it wasn't done. Unemployment in Italy during the entire COVID period was less than it was a year before that when there was no COVID. German unemployment went from 5% roughly in March to 6% roughly now. In short, in every major European country, they did not do what the United States did. They didn't throw tens of millions of people out of work, throwing them on unemployment. Adding to their losses of unemployment, the unspeakable anxiety of wondering whether they'd ever have a job again, whether the job they lost would be there when they went back looking for it, which we all know millions of them won't. We already know that. And so they're all wondering, is the roulette wheel going to come down and point on me? To add anxiety to the worries about the illness, to the worries about managing your children who can't go to school, your distance, I mean, it's unspeakable. And let me tell you why in Europe the reaction was so much better. The European leaders, whether they're right-wing, left-wing, or in the middle, they know the following. Labor unions, socialist parties, communist parties, they're much stronger in Europe than they are in the United States, and that's been true for a long time. And everyone there knows if you had dared throw tens of millions of working people out of their jobs, out of the security of their jobs, they wouldn't have gone home to watch TV. They would have gone into the streets and they would have shut down those economies way more totally than any pandemic could. And everyone there knew it. So here was the deal in Europe. The government will help you in your business, but you cannot fire anyone.
That's really amazing. He has so much knowledge on all this stuff, and it's great hearing him lay everything out. So there are a lot of people who would argue that much of the blame goes to China because of the authoritarian nature of China. They kind of wanted to deflect, obfuscate, downplay the nature of the outbreak, and by the time they took it seriously, it was too late, and they lied to the world, and so there's blame there. I think that's a fair point, but I think Richard Wolff's point is undeniable, and what he's saying is capitalism and public health don't work well together. They don't go together, and the reason why we didn't have warehouses with N95 masks and ventilators and everything we would need for such a situation is because it wasn't profitable to do that. And under our system, what's the point if it's not profitable to do it? If it's not profitable to do it, and there's no short-term benefit to anybody, to a moneyed interest out there, what's the point? And so we were caught. And we had no idea how to handle this. We were scrambling from day one. He said it. We have, about 4% of the population of the world and 25% of the COVID deaths. Even if you account for other countries fudging their numbers, we still have a disproportionate, number. And a lot of that is because of how we're handling it. And again, you could see it even in economic reaction too, how irresponsible we are. Because he's giving the example of Europe. The example I always go to is in France, where the government decided we're going to keep paying 84% of workers' wages all the way through the summer. All the way through the summer. So they're still getting it right now, and it's going to go all the way through next summer. Why? Because they know COVID is still a problem, and people need this assistance. The economy is not going to be back to any semblance of normalcy, and so we have to give people a lifeline. That's what they're doing. The UK did a similar thing. You have Canada has a pretty generous benefits package that's still paying out. Here, we did a one-time 1,200, I think, stimulus check, and we shut down so much. So people were losing their jobs, and they weren't getting help. They only got that one stimulus check, and then they're screwed. They're screwed. The CARES Act was really more to help corporate America and the billionaires, and the Fed's actions were more to help the stock market. So the people who got left behind were the workers. There was no payment plan where we nationalize wages, where we get 80% or whatever of your wages if you're a worker. We didn't have that. We didn't have a universal basic income program. We don't even have Medicare for all. So people go bankrupt because of medical bills in a pandemic. This is a mess. It's all a mess. And so at every level, we failed. We failed with the economic response. We failed with the public health response. And we're dealing with the consequences. And what Richard Wolff is saying is, guys, this is part and parcel of our system, of our hyper-capitalist system. Our incentives are all messed up. And, just the fact that other countries and their social democracies, they did so much better. That says a lot, doesn't it? That says a lot about the nature of social democracy to work for the broader population versus a hyper-capitalist system, or I would call it a corporatist system here, because we really have socialism for the wealthy. That's the CARES Act. And how that system that we have here screws the overwhelming majority of the population. This is why, guys, billionaires became $845 billion richer since the beginning of this pandemic. So really, you're exacerbating the wealth and income inequality. You're exacerbating it. So as poverty increases among regular people, you have the rich are getting richer. So all of these problems are getting worse. And again, what Richard Wolff is saying is this was going to happen by virtue of the fact that we have a capitalist system like we do. This was going to happen because we don't have the proper incentive structure to accommodate for an emergency like a pandemic. It requires a totally different philosophy. It requires something that our capitalist system doesn't offer. And so we fared way worse than most places. So anyway, I thought that this interview was very illuminating. Credit to David Pakman for having him on. This new book of Richard Wolff's sounds fascinating. I'm probably going to read it. The thing I think that frustrates me more than anything is that the answers are actually very, very simple. So we could have nationalized wages from early on like the other developed countries did. We could have done that. We didn't do it. Right now, we could cut a UBI check every month. We're not doing it. We could expand Medicare so everybody gets coverage and coverage is free. We're not doing it. Why? You could argue, the ideology is one of the reasons that, we're married to this fundamentally broken system that we have here. But yeah, the other aspect of it is corruption. If the leaders are bought and owned by the billionaires and the corporations, The billionaires and the corporations, the last thing they would allow is our system to become more socialized, our system to become a better mixed market system and a social democracy, because that might cut into their profits. That might change our priorities. And they care so much more about maintaining a competitive edge and profit than they do about public safety that they'd never allow that to happen. So the thing that frustrates me most is that the answers are simple, but we refuse to do them. So if you really think about it, that is a pretty murderous system that we're living under, isn't it?